Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Teal Garcia. If you are not new here, welcome back, and I'm still Teal Garcia. Today we're going to talk about reasons why your photos are still blurry. As part of any mentoring that I do for new growing photographers, we go over kind of what their goals are, pictures that they've taken recently. I have them show me their favorite picture and something like a picture that they love, but like they could have done something differently. I go over all that stuff, and 99% of the time it ends up being that the photo that they love, that they wish they could change something about, is a photo, like a great moment they captured, but the photo's blurry. So you definitely can't fix the situation unless you understand why a photo is blurry. So if you are struggling with blurry photos, or photos that just aren't like tack sharp, this is the video for you. I'm gonna tell you some things to look for and to pay attention to, and hopefully that will help you get sharper photos or get like not blurry photos. The first one is the absolute most common one, and it is your shutter speed. There's like a really bad storm outside right now. It's like crazy windy and crazy rainy. So if you hear like weird, it was even doing like the spooky sounds in the entryway, like the woo. So if you hear any of that, the house is not haunted. There's just a really bad storm outside and I needed to film. The first and most common one that I see when I'm going over people's portfolios and their pictures are not as sharp as they want is shutter speed. So a lot of people when they're learning, they click their camera in auto, and that's why anybody that teaches anything to do with photography tries to tell you to learn manual. I know it's scary, I know it's intimidating, but for some reason, and I've actually tested this, for some reason, when you click your camera into auto, shutter speed's like the first thing that goes to shit. Shutter speed, like the camera does not care. Like it will leave, like I don't know, to me, and that's the most important thing. So if anybody like moves at all, your shutter speed is so low. So especially if I see somebody's settings and it says they shot something at 1/40 is the shutter speed, I know they either are shooting in auto or they don't understand how important shutter speed is. It's so important. My rule of thumb, and I've talked about it before, my rule of thumb is 1/250. I try not to go underneath that. Possibly if your camera's on a tripod, possibly if there's no movement whatsoever, you can go below it, but I just think that's such a good standard is 1/250. A lot of people will say that you should double the length of your lens, but if you're using a 35mm lens, 1/70 I think is still too slow. So I just don't go under 250. So during a shoot, I pay attention, and at any point I have to change my shutter speed, you know, to let more light in. If I have to change my shutter speed below 250, that's when I'll start messing with other things, and I'll, you know, up my ISO or whatever. Like I'll, you know, turn my aperture down a little bit. But yeah, most of the time 1/250 is going to give you at least a really good starting off point. It's going to make sure that things aren't, you're not getting weird motion blur. So motion blur can happen two ways. Motion blur can happen because your subject's moving, and it can also happen because as steady as you think you are holding your camera, you're not that steady. There's some movements, you're breathing, you're moving, there's wind, like whatever. There's some kind of movement. So motion blur can happen either way. So even if it's, you know, unless your camera is on a tripod and you're not even touching it, because even hitting a shutter button, you could be moving your camera a little bit. So yeah, shutter speed, super duper important to understand it. And to, again, my rule of thumb, 1/250 is the absolute lowest that you can go. The other thing that I see the most is not understanding focus points. So let's say you're like, well, my shutter speed was 1/400. There's no reason for my photo to not be like tack sharp, right? Well, there's other things that matter. Shutter speed, I do believe, is the most important, but it's not the only thing that you have to pay attention to. So I think the other thing that people don't pay attention to is their focus modes. And what I mean is when you look through your camera, so like especially like the newer higher end cameras will be like, oh my God, there's 60 focus points. You look in your camera and there's all these little boxes and you're focusing on their eye, but why is your camera like focused on, you know, on their hair and their eyes aren't in focus? I actually don't use a lot of focus points. So a lot of cameras, they'll have like tons of focus points, and it's like, oh, you can focus anywhere. I believe that the focus points right in the center of your camera are the sharpest. So that's like the center of your lens. I personally think those are the sharpest ones. So those are the only ones I use. And a lot of cameras will have different options for this, where you can have all the focus points selected. So what this means is all 60 of those are turned on, and your camera is going to choose 9 times out of 10 what's closest to the camera. So this is essentially an auto setting. So when you have all of your autofocus points on, you're letting the camera choose what to focus on. So then there's usually other ones where you can do ranges. So you can do the little grid in the middle, and you can do the top and the sides and the bottom. You can select just those grids. To me, that's still not good enough, because if there's any more than one focus point, you cannot put that focus point where you want it. And I think that's still letting your camera do too much guessing. So what I do, I use the single point focus, and I use it right in the middle of my camera. And I know that a lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, you shouldn't use just the center point in your camera, because then you're gonna end up with a lot of like centered photos. Well, you know what, that's how I shoot. There's such thing as focus and recompose. I do a lot of that too. My one focus point in the middle, I'll focus, you know, so you can either do back button focus. If you don't know what that is, I can do a video on that. Or same thing, hold your shutter down halfway, focus, and then take the picture. So that's what I do. I focus with that single point. I focus halfway down or back button focus. I recompose, and I take the shot. It's something that I teach when I do mentor shoots, because I have found that I get the sharpest images that way. Some people will disagree. There's other ways to focus where it's not a single, because I do that. I go focus, shoot, focus, shoot. I've definitely talked about how I focus and recompose in previous videos. That to me gets the sharpest photos. You're not leaving all these autofocus points on for your camera to guess. You can put that focus point right where you want it. So you can still compose your shot how you want it, rule of thirds, whatever you want to do. But I find that honestly works the best. There's a couple other settings that have to do with focus. There's a lot of cameras have like the tracking settings. So it's like Al Servo and something else, and one shot, where you can focus on your subject and continuously track them while they're moving. A lot of sports photographers will use that kind of stuff. I personally haven't ever loved that. Again, I still feel like it's giving your camera too much power. I would rather, you know, focus, recompose, like I'd rather be doing this while I'm shooting than just trust that my camera's gonna focus correctly, or like really stay locked into that subject when they're moving. So I don't know, I guess it's a personal choice, but I say that anything you can do to take the power out of your camera's hands and put it into your own. So I select the focus point, I select what's focused on, and I take the shot, instead of letting the camera track or letting the camera, you know, continuously, I don't know. I don't like any of that stuff. So I recommend, so if you like the idea of those settings, play with them, but also play with that one shot. Play with the one shot with the one, you know, autofocus point. Do all that. I don't recommend manual focusing. I actually noticed that too, when a lot of people are like, oh my God, you should shoot in manual. You're crazy. You're not a real photographer unless you're shooting in manual. Manual is the mode. Manual is not your focus. You don't want to manual focus unless you have to. So I do have a few lenses, like some older lenses with an adapter that you have to manually focus. And I mean, they're cool, but nobody wants to do that. You cannot chase a kid around at a family shoot and be manually focusing. Like nothing is gonna be in focus. I'm sorry, like it's not gonna happen. So just, you know, keep that in mind too. Manual does not mean manual focus. You'd be surprised how many, especially when people are learning, they got their first camera, they're like, I gotta do everything in manual or I'm not doing it right. That does not mean focus. Autofocus is the only thing that should be auto. Okay, so that's kind of all I had. It's definitely a short video. I do want to mention one more thing that I don't know if everybody will agree with necessarily, but I think that, and it's a common thought, just, you know, when we're teaching photography, a lot of mentors and teachers, when they're teaching photography, they like to say like, your gear doesn't matter. However, I do think, and I know from personal experience from using kit lenses and then upgrading them, and then my world was like changed. Same camera, just a different lens. I do think that lenses have a little bit to do with like the crispness, I cannot talk, the crispness of your photos. So if you're doing everything right, but you have the kit lens that came on your camera, maybe try and, you know, make that your first goal to upgrade that. But you will notice that better glass will always give you sharper images. I'm not telling you to go upgrade. I'm just saying if all else fails and your photos are not sharp like you want them, or as sharp as they can be, and everything else looks good on paper, and there's just no reason for them to not be in focus, it could be your lens. Okay, so that's all I have on that. It's a pretty common thing. Like I said, it's something that comes up in every single mentor session that I have, because that's like the most important thing, right? Like everyone would make sure that their photos are sharp and not blurry. So I hope you got something out of this video. If you have any other tips, if I missed something or there's something that was like game changer for you, let me know. If you have any other video ideas or any questions that you'd like me to answer in videos, you can also let me know. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, please do so. And I will see you next time. Bye.